Welcome to the crypto trading channel. My name is Stu. Well, guys, as nice as it has been seeing Bitcoin climbing a little bit recently, there are some early red flags I want to discuss here. Of course, as always, I will take a look at potential bullish setups as well as potential bearish setups, basically that are currently jumping out at me on several different time frames. Just a few important levels I think that are important to pay attention to in the near future here, especially with the weekly candle closing soon, as this could end up sparking some additional volatility very soon here. So with that, let's start with the midterm trend on the 4-hour chart to get a feel for what the market is currently doing here, you guys. In the more immediate time frame here on the 4-hour, just looking at the immediate trend here, you guys. I've been talking about the 77K level for basically all week at this point. Just currently even zooming in and micro-analyzing a little bit further, basically the range that we're in on the 4-hour on a much smaller range here would be between my two white lines here, basically. My reasoning for that, it is a smaller range inside the main range. My main range is still from 77K down to approximately, well, right around 60K basically. But the smaller range inside that main range is basically for me between 72.2K down to about 65K. My reasoning for that, you guys, is because even though we're in that bigger range, just kind of looking at what happened with the market structure here is basically, even though this is just a wick, this was technically our high, slightly higher high, and the lowest point between the two was here, and that level was broken. Now that to me confirms this as our current bearish pivot point basically for the range. And since that, we actually ended up setting a low and a lower low, therefore a confirmed lower high on that little trend, which we ended up breaking now. So that confirms my bullish point right here, basically. So that's why I have this mapped out the way that I do currently. Where we have so far run into problems, should we be worried about that? Is it unexpected? Honestly, guys, where we got rejected here, some of you are going to know exactly where I'm going with this. But since we had a confirmed bearish pivot point of some kind here, if I were to pull a fib from that bearish pivot, rather, I think I just said bullish. If we pull a bearish fib pull from the bearish pivot point to basically just waiting to when we get some sort of a STUBER fib setup, if we go to where we did end up getting that bullish reversal there, notice where we have so far ended up running into problems is, to nobody's surprise, right along the 786 there. So at this point, I mean, not too crazy to see that we get some sort of a rejection there. And even now that we can even zoom in on inside that range, look at what happened here, right? On the very immediate trend, we had a higher high, therefore confirmed higher low, and we have lost that as well, right? So this is kind of the main concern. Like I said, there's some early red flags showing is that even where we are losing structure on shorter time frames in smaller ranges, where we're getting rejected and all those kinds of details, you guys, it really gives me a little bit of concern about the market, because I mean, a lot of people are celebrating that the bottom is in. And guys, we only came within about 5,000 US dollars of a very micro lower high on the 4-hour trend. So even the midterm trend isn't even close to being invalidated yet and proving that we are bullish at this point, guys. So you guys, for those of you who are interested in just seeing way more examples how I'm looking at market structure in general, some of my trade setups, strategies, warnings, and so on, be sure to scan the QR code on the screen, get into my Telegram. And guys, this will actually also grant you free unlimited algo bot trading as well, due to our exclusive partnership with Prime Automation. And yeah, just the last few days, you guys, even my algo bots have been going absolutely nuts here. I got about 25 of them set up with just going with a lower percentage of my account balance and dropping leverage down to 2 or 3x leverage. But I got a whole bunch of these because that's one of the beautiful things about our partnership. We are not basically limited to holding 10 algo bots at one time. We actually have unlimited through our partnership. And like I said, it's free. So that's very cool. And to top it all off, you guys, Blowfin is also celebrating this partnership by giving this special promotion to new signups under us until February 20th. So if this amazing free deal interests you, be sure to scan the QR code on the screen, you guys. But yeah, just going back to the 4-hour chart, you guys, like I said, that's kind of the range that I'm looking at for the smaller range, the more immediate range between these white lines. So basically, a couple of things to watch for from here is technically, like I said, the fact that we have this bullish pivot here, it is possible that we end up taking another swing at the top of this range and going a little bit higher. And in that case, I think it's quite likely. Actually, what I would like to see, even with that, is just since we did break this level here, I would like to see us come down and retest even support if it's for the smaller range, right? Either way, I think it's quite likely that we do pull back a little bit further, even if we are bullish in here, just because, yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense to basically retest support after getting this premature bullish pivot, basically. I think that is possible, but if that happens, I would still have my concerns at this purple or red box here, just because that would be basically the resistance of the main range that I was talking about, right? Because as far as the main range goes, this is where we had our low, lower low, confirmed lower high right at that 77K level. So if I pull a bearish fib from that level, that is basically where my purple and red boxes line up, right? My purple box being the STUBER fib resistance, the red box being potential fake out liquidity grab zone, basically. So on the other side of that exact theory is if we end up dropping out of the white range here to the downside, is I don't think that necessarily means all hope is lost for the bulls, because we do still technically have this untested support. So one thing to consider is you guys can obviously see that, again, just like on the opposite side of things, we have a purple box for my STUBER support, as well as a green box instead of red for my fake out zone, basically a swing fail, liquidity grab zone, something like that, just because of where we have currently bottomed here to where we have currently topped. If we end up retesting that support, it's possible that the bulls end up stepping in these levels. One thing to consider about that is it's not actually a confirmed STUBER setup, because for an actual STUBER setup, the way that I trade those is I need some structure broken to favor that retest, right? It's still very possible that we find support at the 786, 886, or even the 1 to the 115. Absolutely possible, because it is still technically support, and you would actually see the structure on a shorter time frame. But as far as looking at it on the 4-hour, I would feel much better about this if we had actually gone up and taken out this level, just to kind of have bullish momentum favoring us when we end up retesting that support, right? So something to consider there. As I mentioned, the weekly chart is, well, basically the weekly candle is going to close in about 6 minutes here. And you guys, the weekly chart looks terrible to me. Although it does look like obviously some sort of a bounce could be expected, just because it's been such a straight down shot here. We've just been smashing through support levels. The unfortunate part about this is, even if we see a strong bounce, like you guys, the fact that I'm seeing people claim that the bottom is in, and with a lot of confidence, people are saying that. When you really zoom out and look at the weekly here, do you see any sort of bullish structure here? Absolutely not, right? We ended up losing this support level, this support level, this support level, this support level. Just the bears have been on an absolute mission, just smashing through support levels, which has been giving us lower lows, confirming lower highs. So even if we get a strong bounce, when we actually look at the macro timeframes, you guys, the immediate lower high on the weekly time frame is way up at about 97, 98K. So even we could bounce all the way to 98K and still be in a bearish trend on the longer time frames. So just be a little bit cautious with that. On top of just the basic market structure, you can see I have this chart prime indicator up, the 3D trend. Once again, just how we ended up basically retesting that when we flipped red here, or orange rather, just like in previous market cycles, right? When we get those retests of that resistance of that band, it's been, basically devastating to the price, right? We have often got very much so rejected off that on the weekly time frame, just like we did up here. But the good news with that is obviously that we are getting overextended, pulling quite a bit of ways away from that. So it's very possible we see a bounce. However, I just don't want to really bet against the trend at this point too much quite yet. Taking a look at some other indicators though, let's take a look at my other chart prime indicators. I mentioned this on my last stream, the fact that this orange pocket down here is the money flow point of control. We got very close to that level. It's still a little bit further down, but basically all the way down to about 55K. But, you know, we are getting close to that level. So as far as trading volume goes, or just money flow rather, as far as a point of control, we are getting very close to potential support there. And as well, it lines up with this reactor band down here. This reactor support, which generally speaking on the weekly, it hasn't really broken yet. The only time we actually broke below and flipped it from green to gray was after the FTX collapse, but we really just kind of flipped that indicator neutral because it never even flipped red, it just flipped gray. So the worst it's ever been on this chart has been neutral. And so the fact that we are also getting close to that and just seeing these indicators overlapping like that, there is potential support there, right? So I don't want to totally rule that out. But obviously anything is possible. This doesn't have to hold again. Just at this point, it's nice confluence for the bullish perspective, at least. Taking a look at Bitcoin on the shorter time frames, you guys, looking at the 5-minute chart. Once again, just pointing out my range in white, basically. So just taking a look at how structure has formed here. I was talking about this in my Telegram channel earlier, you guys, just pointing out that every time we were setting a lower low along the trend, we were basically confirming lower highs. So basically where we ended up getting our bearish pivot was here. This is micro analyzing, but we had that wick high, and this one is slightly higher. It's hard to see on my screen right now, I'm sure. But even if we wanted to go with this and then this as our higher high, either way, we lost some structure right here. And especially how I look at STUBER fibs, I just look for that microstructure. So that is my confirmed bearish pivot. Just like down here where we had a low and a lower low, you can see it better on the bullish side here. We had a confirmed lower high here, which we ended up breaking. So that gives me my bullish pivot point. So basically my confirmed range on the 5-minute, the range low is basically 68K. And the range high is about 71K. And you can see that even after getting this, I don't know how long this is going to run. Like we don't have to end up just absolutely smashing back to the top side of the range. But you can see that as far as a typical STUBER fib setup, this one would have already played out, right? We have our bullish pivot here because we broke that structure. And notice where we end up coming and pulling back to, basically bang on that 786. And we are already very close to that 214 target. So obviously that's a small range, but you see this structure in all sorts of shapes and sizes, right? You see that structure break followed by a pullback where most traders want to trade into basically FOMO into the breakouts. I like to wait for that pullback after the break. And at least that way you're dialing in your risk, right? Your risk reward is significantly better because your invalidation is significantly closer. So again, I don't want to totally rule the bulls out of the picture because we do, even right now on the micro time frame, we do technically have that potential bullish reversal there. I personally never took the long there. I have several algo bots that did end up taking longs. So we'll see how those go. So I don't feel like I have FOMO if I missed a little bit of a long on Bitcoin because I've got enough positions on the go as it is. But nice to see that kind of structure. So if we do end up blasting through this resistance and this STUBER fib setup does turn into a runner, where I would basically start to look for resistance at this point is since I have my confirmed range, that was the bullish setup. There's also a bearish setup if we end up pulling from our range high, right? Pulling a bearish fib, something like this, where I would be looking at resistance to start basically at about 70.3K and running up to about 71.4K. So looking into shorting this kind of a setup, basically I would be looking at laddering into a position, just slightly front running my fibs. And if we end up invalidating that 115, that's basically where I'd look to cut my losses quickly, just in case we end up going on a bigger run, right? Because if we invalidate this 5-minute trend, it's very possible that we're going to go and test because, well, basically on the 4-hour, that would be this. that 5-minute I was just showing you, that would be that range pull basically. So if we end up invalidating that, it's very likely, in my opinion, that we'd end up coming up and testing more so the midterm resistance levels. So in that case, I would be more so looking to re-enter up in these levels, looking for a shorter time frame, much like the 5-minute setup, but more so inside the 4-hour resistance zones is what I would be looking for there. So yeah, like I said, I do think that it's possible we get this kind of a bearish setup on the 5-minute. Hell, realistically, it's possible that we get one even shorter, right? Like I said, you always see these ranges, the smaller ranges inside bigger ranges, inside bigger ranges. And technically right here, I mean, this would even be valid structure, right? The fact that we had this high, higher high, confirmed higher low, we broke that. So now as this bullish STUBER has been playing out, and as we get close to the second target, notice that the second target, if I pull that bullish fib, notice that second target, the 214, is just front running the 786 from the opposite side, right? So it's very possible that we see some sort of a rejection fairly soon as well. So just something to watch out for there. But the ideal short setup for me right now would be basically getting back up towards the top of this range and getting into something, laddering into those resistance levels, basically. Guys, if you do appreciate my level-headed approach, looking at the market for what it is, trading the charts for what they are, rather than looking for the bullish hopium and trying to trade fundamentals, but zooming into a 5-minute, right? That's the thing. The fundamentals do matter, you guys. It's just that trying to trade them is incredibly difficult, especially on a shorter time frame. Yeah, if you're spot trading on the weekly time frame, sure, fundamentals may matter. But if you're trying to trade the 5-minute or something like that, and you're trying to trade fundamentals, I mean, good luck, right? I would way rather be trading the charts, because if fundamentals matter, the chart structure is going to back up that theory, right? So if you do appreciate that I just look at the charts for what they are rather than what I hope they become, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And just before I take a look at a couple of altcoins, you guys, let me just catch up on the chat a little bit. Love to have you here with me, my friends. Thank you so much for being here with me once again. Nice to see some familiar people in here. Love that you guys keep coming back. So thank you. I appreciate that. You guys clearly appreciate what I have to say. So love to see it, my friends. I hope you guys are not only surviving, but absolutely thriving in this market volatility. Hopefully that some of these things that I'm saying, some of these levels that I'm pointing out and, giving my 2 cents on, hopefully that that's kind of the missing piece in your puzzle or added confluence to something you're already looking at. I would absolutely love if that is the case, you guys. Still in a downtrend, nice bullish divs the couple of days ago. Just intrigued if we get a relief bounce. Yeah, you and I both. I do think that it would make a lot of sense to see a relief bounce. It's just that I would really like to see 4-hour structure broken and then seeing some sort of a support retest, or just breaking the downtrend on the 4-hour in general would be a great start. If we start, if we end up continuing, like, let's say, as I mentioned, my line in the sand's basically 77K. So let's say we end up breaking that, but we don't get that STUBER fib retest. Let's just say we end up doing something like this. Well, at least if we start staircasing like that, we then have confirmed structure once again, right? So at that point, we would be able to start pulling bullish fibs as well, looking for some sort of a retest with decent risk reward at that point to chase the trend, basically. And until that trend breaks, that's when I would start to assume that we're going to come and retest the bullish STUBER setup at that point. But there's a lot of what ifs between now and then, obviously. How do you deal with seemingly overlapping bearish and bullish pivots? I'm assuming we give weight to the higher time frame one. That kind of depends, right? Because often they will both play out, right? It's not so much that one has to overpower the other. It totally depends how structure forms. But if you're actually taking profits at the take profit levels, quite often they can both play out at the same time. So execution matters more than prediction, for sure. If we break 80K resistance, could I see 100 to 105K? Well, like I said on the weekly time frame, I think there's very possibly resistance before that, because resistance then would basically start around, well, 89K even, just because of how the structure is on the weekly. So I don't think if we break 80, we necessarily need to go all the way to 100. Unfortunately, the way that Bitcoin has formed structure on basically every time frame is, since we've been in such a nasty downtrend for the last 4 months or so, Bitcoin has just created a ton of resistance above us. Basically, any time frame you look at, you'll see indicators pointing out resistance. You'll see structure pointing out resistance. There's just so much resistance above us, no matter what we end up doing, that I just yeah, I'm basically more interested in just letting bounces play out and continuing to play the downtrend until, like I said, once structure starts breaking and stuff like that, then that's all fair game. It's just that as we are in a downtrend, I'm going to show a lot of respect to resistance levels. Even if I'm not comfortable shorting a resistance level, let's say I'm in some long positions, I would look to start taking profits on long positions as we get to resistance levels. I wouldn't be looking at FOMOing into long positions with leverage into resistance like a lot of people do, right? Any thoughts on Bitcoin dominance? That was actually the next thing I was going to bring up here. With the 3D trend indicator on Chart Prime here, notice that we do have, we're flipping a little bit of resistance here, as well as, once again, my orange box, the money flow point of control. So there is resistance here for Bitcoin dominance, and that would actually be very good for the market if this can push the Bitcoin dominance to the downside. One thing to consider is there is technically a bullish STUBER, something like this, where we are testing the 786. Technically, it's played out already. It hit the 0.5 fib. But from a structural point of view, we technically have support on the Bitcoin dominance. And if Bitcoin dominance is climbing, obviously that's generally bad for the market. But it is nice to see that we have some indicators starting to show a little bit of resistance. And the fact that we've tested the 786 so many times, I'm really hoping that this can roll over. Because as I always say, guys, if Bitcoin dominance does get pushed off a cliff and start trending down to the downside aggressively, that's a big green light for altcoins to kind of get their big moment in the sun and actually see, even if it's short-lived, just hopefully some sort of an altcoin season at that point, right? So you can see that on this indicator, and as well, if I bring up these other guys, just notice, like I said, that money flow point of control is now resistance, as well as these reactor bands, right? We have both of them red above us. So Bitcoin dominance would need to reclaim that. And then if it starts trending to the upside, that would be a very bad sign for the market, in my opinion. The profit for profit, preaching it again. Preach, brother, preach. Stubers be stubin'. Taking a look at Solana, guys. This is another one. Obviously, already had this mapped out, but this is another one. Just looking at very basic market structure on the 5-minute. Maybe some of you guys ended up catching this. Like I said, some of my bots have positions, so I actually already have a Solana long open from a couple days ago. But this is just another typical example of a beautiful STUBER fib setup, right? We had this low, we had a lower low, therefore the highest point between the two, the lower high. That was broken. Eventually, we came back, tested the fib pocket absolutely perfectly. First target, second target, and we see what happens from there. If you were in a long position from there, you'd still have, if you trade it like me anyways, you'd still have about half your position running just in case it turns into a runner. But obviously taking profits at your profit levels to reduce risk, make sure you're paying yourself and that sort of thing. But yeah, just a typical STUBER fib scalp setup right there. Hype is looking like right now, actually, just how it just broke structure here, we would have something very similar because we had a low here, lower low, confirmed lower high. Now that we have broken that, technically we could watch for some sort of a bullish fib pull, something like that. If it ends up dropping, though, if we look at the bigger range, this is kind of what I see, that there's a high, higher high, confirmed higher low. So we could end up seeing something like this. If we pull back a little bit further, there is technically support there. The problem with a setup like this, this bigger fib pull, is that if this one gets invalidated, technically there's another one right below it. So you could end up, if you're trying to play that, you could end up technically taking a few losses trying to trade something very similar. So waiting for the bigger trade setup might be a little bit safer, but you also may end up missing it, right? There's no guarantee that we're going to come down to these levels, but if we do, that's a typical STUBER fib setup right there for hype, if you ask me. Correlation from Bitcoin to the SPX has been broken. Yeah, I mean, it goes through phases. It does every cycle, that sometimes they end up moving together, but then other phases they end up not moving together. So as it stands right now, I mean, when I do my trading, I don't focus on the S&P all too much, to be honest, because I treat everything as their own thing. Like even when I'm trading altcoins, I treat each altcoin chart as its own setup, right? I mean, yeah, it's good to have a general idea what the rest of the market's doing and that sort of thing. But yeah, when it comes to actually placing a trade, I really only care about the chart that I'm personally trading. So as far as correlations, they come and go. They go in phases. Anyways, guys, I think that's about all I wanted to go over today. Just wanted to do a live stream, like I said, with the weekly candle that just closed about 12 minutes ago. It's very possible that we see volatility kick into the market. So I just kind of wanted to go over some of those levels that I personally see as important anyways, just some of those potential levels, looking for setups and that sort of thing. So one last time, guys, if you do appreciate these live streams, these market updates, please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And as a reminder, for those of you interested in joining my private Telegram channel, as well as gain free access to unlimited algo bot trading through Prime Automation, plus this special promo from Blowfin for new signups until February 20th, do yourselves a favor, get in my Telegram by scanning the QR code on the screen or clicking the link in the description down below. If the chart prime indicators I use interest you, use our sign up link and discount code down below to receive a 35% discount. And actually, guys, I actually received this impressive feedback from a member the other day who's been trading the STUBER fib strategy for a while now, absolutely smashing it. Account up 30% while Bitcoin is down 30%, and was able to pay for a nice holiday recently while crushing the market. Absolutely love to see this, my friends, and just goes to show what having a level head with a systematic strategy can achieve. And yeah, that being said, my friends, I think that's about all I wanted to go over. So once again, thank you so much for being here with me once again, my friends. Stay safe.